Hi everybody, the purpose of this video is to introduce Chapter 3, Formulas and Linear Inequalities, and specifically Section 1 of Chapter 3, when we are going to talk about working with certain formulas. In this section, we're going to talk about evaluating formulas for a given collection of values, depending upon the specific formula, how to solve formula for a specified variable in terms of all the other variables. In other words, we're going to talk about how to manipulate or rearrange formulas for the variable that we care about, and then we're going to use these formulas to solve a variety of applications. The challenge for this particular section has to do with manipulating or rearranging formulas. Formulas are basically expressions that have more than one variable, or basically more than one non-numeric symbol, such as an x or a y or whatever. Up until now, we've been dealing with equations which have exactly one non-numeric variable. It's either x or it's y or it's something else. Well, these will have some numbers, but it'll also have a collection of letters. Each letter can either be treated as a variable or a parameter. What is a variable? A variable is the letter that we care about. What is the parameter? That is the parameter is basically the letter that we are not trying to solve for, but is going to be part of the solution nonetheless. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when you're dealing with formulas. The first thing is it's helpful to be a little OCD. You have to be very, very particular about how you move the letters and how you move the numbers and everything else. The rules are still the same, but nonetheless, if you are going to divide one side of the equation by a particular variable or parameter, you want to do the exact same thing with the other side, or with addition. Secondly, you want to use the letters or symbols exactly as they are written. There is there is no flexibility between an uppercase letter and a lowercase letter. In many cases, uppercase letters and lowercase letters have completely different meanings. The primary example we have here is lowercase v. That tends to stand for velocity of a particular object, or it could also stand for volume of a particular fluid or substance. However, uppercase v may represent the voltage potential of a particular object. Another example would be lowercase I. Lowercase I tends to stand for the imaginary number. However, uppercase I can stand for interest. It could also stand for current. So we want to keep those things in mind when we are manipulating or working with formulas. Now, in this section, we will have a finite number of formulas to work with, and these will be the formulas that we will be working with. The first formula is called the simple interest formula. The formula is I is equal to PRT. Notice all letters, no numbers. I stands for simple interest. P stands for the amount of money that you're going to put into it, so the amount invested. R, which is typically a decimal, is an interest rate usually expressed in years, and T is time in years. The next formula that we're going to be dealing with, is the temperature conversion formula, where we convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius, or from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Notice here that we have both a collection of numbers and letters. Actually, here we only have two letters. C, of course, stands for temperature in Celsius, and F, of course, stands for temperature in Fahrenheit. The third formula should be somewhat familiar to you. It is called the distance formula. Basically, once again, it's all letters, no numbers. Meaning we have D equals R times T, where D is the distance traveled, R is the rate or speed. Sometimes it's used as V, but in this class it will be R. And then T, of course, is the time. And in this particular video, T and R will have the appropriate units. Next, we will have the next formula that you might see is the perimeter of a rectangle. That is, and the perimeter, remember, is the distance around the rectangle. So notice to travel the rectangle, you have to travel one width plus one length plus a width again and plus the length again. So it's going to be equal to twice the length plus twice the width. P is the perimeter, L is the length, and W is the width. And then we also have the perimeter of a square, What is a square? Well, a square is basically a rectangle where the length and the width are the same. So since they are the same, both the length is equal to s, the width is equal to s, and the perimeter is equal to 4 times s. Here we have 2 letters and only one number. The next collection of formulas has to deal with triangles. One property of a triangle is that since it is half of a square or half of a rectangle, or in this case half of a parallelogram, it's all 3 angles will add to 180 degrees. And that's what the formula we have here. We have that this angle, alpha, plus this angle, beta, plus this angle, gamma, will equal to 180. And then finally, the perimeter, once again, is the sum of all the sides. A plus B plus C. So if you knew the perimeter and you knew the length of 2 of the sides, you could figure out the length of the third side. And I think this is the last one that we have. This one is the area of a parallelogram. And notice here the area is equal to the base, the length of the bottom, times the height, which is the vertical distance from the bottom to the top. Once again, in this particular case, we have 2 letters or 3 letters, no numbers. And then finally, we have the circumference of a circle. And notice that with a circle of radius r, the circumference, which is capital C, is going to be equal to 2 times this symbol called pi, which is the ratio between the circumference and the diameter, or is also equal to 3.1415627 times the radius. Sometimes you'll be given the circumference. You need to figure out the radius. Okay, so that pretty much are all the formulas that we're going to deal with. The big question here is, well, what is this going to look like in our assignment? And I'm glad you asked, because I'm getting ready to show you. Okay, now in your assignment, you are going to have a collection of problems, probably a little bit more than 7. And each of the 7 problems are going to have the exact same format. So let's just go ahead and walk through these and see and see how we do these. Okay, the first thing we want to do is we want to read the problem. And this problem says that after 8 years, our sales account earned $15,000 in interest. If the interest rate in decimal form is 0.05, how much did Marcel initially invest? And the first thing we need to do is determine the correct formula. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Now notice that this right here is the formula for a square. This right here is the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle. This is our temperature conversion formula. This right here is the formula for interest for a given interest rate and time. That's what we have here. We have the interest for the given interest rate and time, and we want to know how much we invested. So it looks like this would be the formula that we want to click on. Now, what are the other ones? Remember, this is the area formula for a parallelogram. The next one is the circumference, is the formula for the circumference of a circle. And this is the formula for a perimeter of a triangle. And actually, this is one that we did not go over, but this is the area of a trapezoid. For this particular problem, we want to click right here because we are dealing with interest, we are dealing with an interest rate, and we want to know how much we originally invest. So that's what we have. And shocking as it might be, I was actually correct. Okay. Now, after 8 years, now the second part is without substitution, solve the formula chosen in the previous step for the unknown variable in terms of the known variables. Okay. Now, what are they specific asking here? Well, remember, in the previous step, and if you forgot what your previous step is, you can click on this. Our previous step, we had the formula I equals P R T. Okay? And we know what I is. I is equal to $1,500. R is equal to 0.05. And T is equal to 8. The only thing that we don't know is what P is. Okay, so this is the thing that we want to solve for. Now, we do not want to do any substitutions just yet. We just basically want to work with the numbers. We want to solve for the unknown variable, which is P. The way we solve for P is to get P on one side of the equation and everything else on the other side of the equation. Now notice that P is being multiplied by R, the product of R and T. This is kind of like a coefficient. So to get P by itself, what I need to do is I need to divide this equation by the product of R and T. Now remember, if I'm going to do this on one side of the equation, I got to do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, there we go. Now we can go ahead and simplify. These cancel, these cancel. The only thing I have is P. Over here, I have I divided by R times T. Now I can flip this around. It might be easier if I do that, which is that P is equal to I over R times T. This is what they want you to put in this box over here. Now the big question is, how do you do that? Okay, what we can do is we can click on this, and we can click on the box. And we need to write the equation in using their little equation editor. And this is what we can do. First thing is we can click on the keyboard, because that will come in handy. Click back over here. We can do P equals, this is our fraction. Up here we would put capital I. Down here we can put RT. Okay, and then we can submit our answer. And that is correct. Okay, now for part 3 is where we actually can now put in our numbers, the ones that I crossed out over there. Solve the problem by substituting the appropriate values of the known variables in the formula you found in the previous step. Round your answer to 2 decimal places. So this is the formula from the previous step. If you're concerned about what they are, you can just click on that, and that is what we have. And what they want you to do is they want you to replace every single letter with the number they represent. Okay, we can do that. So I is $1,500. Divided by R, which is 0.05, times T, which is 8. All right, what's that going to be equal to? Well, we can use our trusty calculator to figure this out. So here is my emulation, my computer emulation for a TI-84 series calculator. And what we can do is just go ahead and type in our little expression here. And that will be 1,500 divided by, I'm going to need to use parentheses here, 1,500 divided by, parentheses, 0.05 times 8, close the parentheses, hit enter. And I got $3,750. That is my answer. That is what I want to put in here. 3750. Submit answer. And shockingly enough, I am indeed correct. Okay, now let's move on to our next problem. So this is our next problem. Sue is planning a vacation. The travel agent says the high temperature at the resort is 10 degrees Celsius. So that really helps us a lot. What is the equivalent Fahrenheit temperature? The first question is, and the first part of the question is to choose the correct formula. Okay, so we can go down the formulas. This is the formula for area. That is the formula for circumference. That is the trapezoid formula, which I forgot to talk about. Sorry about that. This is the interest formula. This is the formula for a perimeter of a triangle, for a perimeter of a rectangle, for a perimeter of a square. The P is a dead giveaway. But notice how this P stands for perimeter, and this P stands for principal or amount invested. So depending upon the context, P can mean something different. This is the formula for temperature conversion. We want to click on this formula. Okay, let's see if I'm right. And lo and behold, I am right. Okay, so the next part is we need to take our previous answer, which is right here, and we need to solve for the variable of interest. So we know what c is, we need to figure out what f is. So we need to solve for f. So let's go ahead and start off with our original equation. And remember, we want to solve for this particular variable right here, which basically means that we want this by itself. Right now we have c by itself, but now we want this by itself. And there's a couple of ways to do this. One of the ways to do this is actually one that I really did not talk about in our earlier sections, but it would work very well here. And that is, well, since this expression is being multiplied by 5 nines, we can get rid of that by multiplying this entire equation by 9/5. We're going to multiply this by 9/5. We need to multiply c by 9/5. And what does that do to us? Remember, when we multiply fractions, these multiply together to give us 45. These will multiply together to give us 45. We would have 45 over 45, or 1. Or more importantly, this 9 cancels out that 9, that 5 cancels out that 5. And what we have is 9/5 c is equal to f minus 32. Okay? Then all we need to do is get rid of the 32 using the addition property. So I'm going to add 32 here. I'm going to add 32 here. And then when we do the addition, these will cancel. I will have 9 over 5c plus 32 is equal to f. You probably want to flip that around, and that would flip around to f is equal to 9 over 5c plus 32. So all we need to do now is put that into our equation here. Once again, we can bring up our keypad, and we can do it like this. F equals fraction 9, just use your L key down to the 5, get out of the fraction, c plus 32. And there we go. And that brings us to our next part. Okay, now here we actually want to figure out what our answers are. Okay, now here we want to figure out what f is. Now here we have that c is 10 degrees. So what we want to do here is substitute 10 in for c, and then, pardon the expression, see what we get. So let's go ahead and do that. We know that c is equal to 10. All right, so we are going to have f is equal to 9 over 5 times c, which is now 10, plus 32. A couple ways to look at this. Primary way is, well, we know that 10 divided by 5 is 2. Or actually, let's just go ahead and multiply numerators. That's going to be equal to 90 over 5 plus 32. 90 divided by 5 is equal to 18. And 18 plus 32 is equal to 50. So this should be equal to 50. Okay, and it is. Yay for me. Okay, the next one is the perimeter of a square. We know that the perimeter of a square is 13 meters. We want to find the length of one side. Well, the first question is, and actually, if you had this in an exam, you will have access to this information. I will provide you with the formulas. You do not need to memorize them, but you do need to understand which formula is associated with which type of problem. In this type of problem, we have the perimeter of a square. Okay, none of these have to do with perimeter. I went the wrong way. Here is the perimeter of a square. This right here is the formula. So we want to find that one. It's right down here. Okay, next, we can submit answer. I did it right. We can move on. Okay, now we know what P is. P is actually equal to 13. We know what but we don't know what S is. So we have that P is equal to 13. And we know that P is equal to 4S. So here, without substitution, notice don't substitute any numbers yet, Solve the formula chosen in the previous step, that's the formula chosen in the previous, for the unknown variable in terms of the known variable. Once again, this is the unknown variable. This is the known variable. We want to solve for this, which means you want this on its own side of all by itself on the equation. Right now, this is all by itself in this equation. This is not. It has a coefficient of 4. We need to change that coefficient to 1. Of course, we can do that using the multiplication property, and we can divide both sides by 4. Okay? 4 divided by 4, well, that just cancels, and we're just left with s over here. And over here we have p over 4. Okay, we probably want to turn that around, and if we do, we will have s is equal to p over 4. Okay, now we need to write that in. We can actually do this without using the keypad down here. Let me show you how you can do that. Just write down s equals, and then do the slash right below the question mark or in the number pad. That will produce for you the fraction. Then you can put in p on top. You hit the down arrow key and type in 4. That's whatever you're most comfortable with. Sometimes this is faster. And then we can hit submit answer. Lo and behold, I'm correct. Let's move on to the next part. And now we need to do our substitution and see what we get. Now notice here, we want to solve the problem by substituting 13 in for p. And we want to round our answer to 2 decimal places. Okay, so let's see what we have here. We have that p is equal to 13. Okay, and some of you might be able to look at that and just say, hey, cool, man, that's 3 1/4. I'd be really embarrassed if that's wrong. Of course, if that's not clear, well, hey, man, that's why you got to make calculators, right? So here's our calculator. You're going to have 13 divided by 4, 3.25. So we want to round this to 2 decimal places. Well, that is 2 decimal places. So all we need to do now is just type in, let me get this over here, 3.25. And there you go. We're a little less than halfway through it. Yes, I'm going to do them all. This will be a long video. But basically, this video will also cover every single homework problem. Just about every single homework problem that you guys might encounter. Okay, now we have the perimeter of a rectangle. What is the first part? Find the correct formula. Remember, we're dealing with the perimeter of a rectangle, which has a length and a width. Length and a width. Length and a width. This is the formula that we want. So we can just click on that and submit our answer. Okay, we are correct, and now we can move on. Okay, well, notice here we have the perimeter of a rectangle is 36 feet, and the length is 7 feet. We want to find the width. The width is W. Now here, without substitution, we want to solve the formula chosen in the previous step. There's the formula chosen in the previous step for the unknown variable, which is W in terms of the known variables. What does that specifically mean? Well, we're going to do the exact same thing we did earlier. No, we didn't want to do that. We want to do this. Let's write down our formula. That's going to be P is equal to 2L plus 2W. We know what L is. We know what P is. P is 36. And then L is equal to 7. We are looking for W, so we want to solve for W, which means we want all the terms with the W on one side of the equation and everything else on the other side of the equation. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to move terms. It's the first term that we need to move. We move terms using the addition property of equality. So specifically, we want to subtract 2L from here. All right, that will make the 2L term go away. And if we're going to subtract 2L here, we need to subtract 2L here. Using vertical addition, we will have P minus 2L, and then over here, we will have that these cancel, and we'll have 2W. Okay. Once we have that, now we need to get rid of this coefficient. We can get rid of that coefficient using the multiplication property of equality. Specifically, we need to divide this side by 2. Now, if we're going to divide this side by 2, then we also need to divide the entire side, the whole thing here, by 2. And if we do, well, this cancels. Okay? And over here, we just have, and over here, remember my little comment about you have to be LCD, and you have to understand that sometimes you just have to write things just as they are written. This is one particular case. So your answer would be, if you flipped it, would be W is equal to P minus 2L over 2. Now, it is true that you could write this as P over 2 minus L, but there's nothing wrong with this. I'm kind of hoping that Hawks will agree with me. Let's find out. Okay, so we're going to have W equals. Now, I'm going to use the keypad again. I'm going to start my fraction. P minus 2L, capital P minus 2L. And then in the bottom, I'm going to have 2. And there you go. That's all you need. Now remember, P is 36 and L is 7. And that's going to come in handy for the next part. Okay, so now we want to solve the problem by substituting the appropriate values of the known variables, P and L, into the formula we just found in the previous step, which of course is this formula right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to need a little more space here. I wonder if I can do it like this. Yeah, this should work. Okay, so in this particular case, I'm going to have that W is equal to 36 minus 2 times 7, all divided by 2. Now, if I want, and now that we can actually combine this using our order of operations, that'll be 36 minus 14 divided by 2. So this is going to be 22 divided by 2. So we should have that W is equal to 11. If we're not sure, of course, we can always use Mr. Calculator. And here is Mr. Calculator. How can we do this using Mr. Calculator? Well, we have 36. Let me do this differently. Back up. Parenthesis 36 minus 2 times 7 divided by 2. And that gives you 11. So let's put that in there and see if we are correct. And lo and behold, we are. So we can move on. Okay, now, in this one we have a guy named Hamid, and he needs to find the height of a parallelogram. Turns out that the parallelogram's base is 6 inches, and its area is 60 square inches. And what is the height? Well, I bet you 10 to 1, the height is 10 inches. But let's go ahead and walk through the steps. Okay, and remember, we are dealing with area. This is the equation for area of a parallelogram. So it's right here. Area of a parallelogram. A is equal to the base times the height, which is what we have here. We have circle, interest, square, trapezoid, perimeter of a rectangle, perimeter of a triangle, perimeter of a triangle, perimeter of a rectangle, temperature conversion. This is area. So we can just go ahead and click on that. Okay. Now notice in this particular case, our formula is what is it, that our formula again? Well, let's go to the previous step. There it is. A is equal to base times height, or A is equal to BH. I'm glad it says BH and not BS. Okay, and we know what A is. A is 60. Probably should include the inches or the units. And then B is equal to 6. Okay, so we know what A is, we know what B is, we don't know what H is. So what we probably want to do is solve for H, which means we want H on one side of the equation and everything else on the other side. So to do that, we need to divide both sides by B, since we have multiplication here. So I'm going to divide this by B, and if I'm going to do that, I need to divide this by B as well. And if I do, these cancel. I have A divided by B is equal to H. And that is what we want to put in here. Well, not like that. Maybe we want to put in H is equal to A divided by B. Yeah, actually, you can do it backwards as well. Okay, cool. Didn't know that. Okay, so that is correct. And let's go ahead and hit next. And now this is where we need to put the numbers in. Solve the problem by substituting the appropriate values, basically 60 for A, 6 for B, and come up with, and then figure out what our unknown value is, which of course is H. So we can do that. We know that A is equal to 60. B is equal to 6, and that is going to be equal to H, which means that 10 is equal to H. So H is 10 inches. There you go. Okay, and moving on, and now we have the perimeter of a triangle. Perimeter of a triangle is 24 inches. One side measures 8 inches, the other side measures 5 inches. Find the length of the third side C. And of course, we need to find the correct formula. Now, if it's not obvious to you, come back to your notes, come back to this slide. Look for the perimeter of a triangle. Here it is. P is equal to A plus B plus C. There it is. Click on that. All right, that's your answer. Okay, now, in this particular case, let's go to the next verse. In this particular case, the third side is going to be C. Whatever your formula ends up being, it's going to have it's going to look like C is equal to something, whatever that might be. Okay, you just need to figure out what that is. But we're going to have C on one side and everything else on the other side. We're not going to have A here, not B. This side is C. So let's go ahead and start with the original formula, which we got earlier. What is that? Well, there it is. P is equal to A plus B plus C. Now remember, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for C. We want to solve for C. So to do that, we need to get A and B on the other side. And since these are two different terms, we need to move those terms over, we're talking about addition and subtraction. So I want to subtract B from this side. I also want to subtract A from this side, which means that on the other side, I want to do a minus A and I want to do a minus B. Now when I do that, I will have P minus A minus B, and that's going to be equal to what? Well, these cancel. These cancel. All I have is C, and that's what we can put in. P minus A minus B is equal to C. There you go. And then finally, we just got to go ahead and put in our numbers. Notice that P is equal to 24. And then you can call one of these A and the other one B. It doesn't particularly matter, since we might as well just go ahead and be sequential. So we can say that A is equal to 8, B is equal to 5, and then we will have, making our substitutions, P is 24. Let's try that again. P is 24. Minus A, which is 8. Minus B, which is 5. 5. There we go. That's kind of a 5, right? Okay. 24 minus 8 minus 5 is going to be equal to 11. And that is equal to C. So this should be 11. Okay. And believe it or not, we are at the very last question. Here we have the circumference of a circle is equal to 11 pi inches, and we need to find the radius. Now notice that the circumference of the circle, the value of the circumference is given in terms of pi. They do that on purpose. That way the answer that you have to provide will not have to have a pi in it. But nonetheless, in this part we need to choose the correct formula. What is the correct formula? We'll come over here, look at your slides. Circumference of a circle, radius. This is it right here, 2 pi r. That's what we want. And then just to review, this is interest, perimeter of a square, trapezoid, perimeter of a triangle, area of a parallelogram. And by the way, squares and rectangles are indeed parallelograms. Perimeter of a square, temperature conversion. This is the one that we want. Okay, let's make sure. Lo and behold, I'm right. Next part is we want to solve. We want to rewrite the equation in terms of the unknown variable, which in this case is r. So remember, we have our previous answer was c is equal to 2 pi r. We know what c is, we're looking for r. So we want to rewrite this equation so that r is on one side and all the other crud is on the other side. And notice that r is being multiplied by a coefficient. That coefficient we can call 2 pi. Now you might say, well, it's two coefficients. Well, that's true, but you can still treat the combination as one large coefficient. So what we want to do is divide this side by 2 pi. And remember, whatever you do on one side of the equation, you got to do on the other side of the equation. So we're going to divide this side by 2 pi. Okay, now we can divide, we can multiply or divide vertically. And remember that when you're dealing with formulas, sometimes you just have to use the symbols and letters just as they're written, which basically means there's really nothing else that you can do here. So we are going to have c divided by 2 pi. Now here these cancel and these cancel because they will both be 1, and that will be equal to r. And that is our answer. You will have, well, let's get the fraction, capital C, divided by 2. Now, what about the pi? Well, the pi symbol is right down here. You can find the keyboard. Click on that, and then just use your space bar to get your cursor arrows to move on over, and then we will have equals r. And of course, you could put it in the other direction as well. That happens to be correct. All right, and now we go ahead and we substitute our values. Notice that c is equal to 11 pi. So we want to substitute 11 pi in for c, and if we do, we will have 11 pi divided by 2 pi is equal to r. The pi's cancel, and we will have r is equal to 11 divided by 2. And 11 divided by 2 is 5.5. Since they want two decimal places, you can write it as 5.50. I think it would take either one. So we can come over here and we can type in 5.50. And believe it or not, it was correct. So that is pretty much what section 3.1 is all about. If you are comfortable with all of this, you should have absolutely no problem with the assignment. However, if you do, and if you have questions, please feel free to contact me. And with that, this is Bob Boyle, signing off.